So this is a story of every watch collector's worst nightmare. A record-shattering 3.4 million Omega Speedmaster, a holy grail celebrated by the entire watch industry, was revealed to be a complete fraud. But this isn't about just a brilliant fake watch. This is about who actually pulled it off. Because the crime wasn't committed by some random character. It was an inside job by the very people who are supposed to protect the brand and everything about it. And when the gatekeepers become the crooks, it leaves one very terrifying question for us collectors. Can we really trust any brand out there? Now, before we dive into how a crime this audacious was even possible, we need to understand that this wasn't just some cheap knockoff watch. This was a Frankenstein watch. A watch that stops many people buying Rolexes from the grey market, and other watches for that matter. So what actually is a Frankenstein watch? Well, let's imagine for a second we're trying to build a perfect showroom condition 1957 Porsche. However, instead of trying to find an original car, instead you try to source the original parts separately and then put it back together. And so you can buy an engine from somebody, you can buy a transmission from someone else, and wheels and all these other parts, and bring them all together, but it's never going to be the original car. You can assemble them in a way that makes it look like a 1957 Porsche, and it would fool 99.9% of people, but it wouldn't be original. It wouldn't be the real thing. And that is precisely what happened here with Omega. The watch that they sold for 3.4 million was a Frankenstein. It was not authentic or original to the true watch that it was supposed to be. And its most valuable feature was this faded brown tropical dial, which was worth a fortune. And this tropical effect is only possible when you expose the dial to certain conditions over a prolonged period of time. So it ultimately cannot be faked, or can it? You see, the Omega that they sold for 3.4 million was supposed to have that tropical dial, which had been aged for many years, but in reality, they'd artificially aged it with colours. You see, the Omega that they sold for 3.4 million had supposedly went through that process of that tropical dial being kind of developed over time, when in reality, it was actually artificially coloured. And also the movement, the parts inside the watch, were actually sourced from different places to be brought together to resemble something that looked like the original. Now, building a Frankenstein watch is one thing, but getting it through strenuous checks to get it to auction and then selling it for $3.4 million, this is a whole different level of conspiracy. And that is how everyone realized it had to be an inside job. When I first heard this story, this is the most twisted part. I almost couldn't believe it. So in a jaw-dropping announcement, Omega said that the whole scheme was done by 3 of their existing employees. And one of those employees was actually in charge of the Omega Museum. So just let that sink in for a second. Someone whose entire job it was to protect the brand's heritage for Omega was behind one of the biggest scams in watch history. So how did they actually pull off this perfect crime? Well, let me tell you. Now, the insiders didn't just build the watch. They actually created the most masterful trap. They assembled a fake watch so rare that only one person would fall for it. The Omega Museum itself. You see, this watch was a one of one. There was no other watches like this on the planet. And when an Omega comes up like that for auction, the paddle stays up when you are the Omega Museum. You need that Omega in the Omega Museum to protect your brand's history and heritage. It is almost a symbol of where the brand has came from, and the fraudsters knew that. So with the watch ready and the trap set, the insiders started the second part of their plan. The head of the museum apparently persuaded everyone that he knew inside Omega that this watch was a must-have for the museum. If we don't get this watch, it is the end of the world's going to happen. We need to get this watch at all costs. So they made the fake watch, they created the situation, and then they manufactured the hype. But not only that, they also positioned certain people and accomplices inside the auction to drive the price up even further, knowing that Omega would not back down. They convinced the company that they used to work for to spend a fortune on a fake watch that they had created. Now, Omega's a massive company. They're not that bothered about the money. It's more about their reputation. The real damage here can't be measured in millions of dollars. Well, I suppose it can, but it would far outweigh the 3.4 million that they paid for the watch. It can be better measured by the complete demolition of the trust inside the Swiss watch industry. And that is why so many collectors are on their toes. The entire reason somebody wants to buy a Rolex, for example, from a boutique is because they know 100% that it is authentic. And the vintage watch space operates on the exact same system of belief. You have to trust your dealer, or the person you're buying it from, or the auction house in this case. And above all, if you don't trust them, at least you can trust the brand. But this scandal ruined that entire structure, completely destroyed it. And it is every collector's worst nightmare to buy a watch to realise later on when it's too late that the watch isn't what you thought it was in the first place. Because think about it, if the brand that actually made the watch and has all the archives and all the data and all the records of that particular watch freely available to it can be fooled, then what chance do we have? And so if the fraud is being run by insiders, then all of the records and all of the data and all the serial numbers and everything else is just worthless. So what happened next? Well, the fallout was swift. Omega filed criminal charges immediately as soon as they found out, and now the watch is in evidence as the investigation continues. But the questions that this leaves will echo in the watch industry for years. This affair pulled back the curtain on high-end watch collecting and also showed an example of how a brand's love and passion for their own pieces can be used to be weaponized against it. And for collectors, the lesson's a harsh one. In a market flooded with fake Rolexes and other brands, the only true currency is trust. And as the story proves, even at the highest levels, that currency may not be as valuable as we think it is. So do you think this scandal is just a one-off, or do you think that more of this goes on in the luxury watch space? And can we really trust these luxury brands to do as they say and also provide what they are promising? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd be interested to know. But until next time, I'll see you soon.